The blood on her hands had dried to the color of rust, cracked along the lines of her knuckles like old riverbed mud, and the infant in her arms had finally stopped screaming. Lyra pressed her back against the stone wall of the drainage culvert beneath the Greymore packhouse, her bare feet submerged in 2 inches of ice water that smelled of iron and rotting leaves. Above her, through the grate, she could hear the celebration. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses raised to toast the new beater's appointment. No one was looking for her. No one had looked for her in years. She shifted the baby against her chest, tucking the threadbare wool tighter around his face. He was not hers. He belonged to the pack's head cook, Maren, who had hemorrhaged after delivery 3 hours ago in the kitchen pantry between sacks of flour and winter potatoes. Lyra had tied off the cord with butcher's twine, packed the wound with clean dish towels, and carried the baby out through the service tunnel when the bleeding would not stop and no one answered her calls for help. The pack physician was upstairs, at the party, attending to a baiter's wife who had a headache from too much wine. Mara was dead now. Lyra had felt it 20 minutes ago, a strange absence in the air, like a candle snuffed in a room you had just left. She could not explain how she knew. She had always known things she should not know, felt injuries that were not hers, sensed fevers before they spiked. The pack healer had caught her once, years ago, pressing her palm to a sick child's forehead and drawing the heat out through her own skin. He had slapped her hand away and told her if she ever did it again, he would have her tongue cut out. Omega wolves did not heal. Omega wolves scrubbed floors and carried slop buckets and kept their mouths shut. So she kept her mouth shut. The baby made a small, wet sound against her collarbone. His skin was still slippery with birth, and he smelled like copper and something sweeter underneath, like crushed clover. She had cleaned him as best she could with the hem of her dress, which was already ruined, stiff with Maren's blood from the waist down. She was 19 years old. She had been the Greymore Pack scullery worker since she was 11, when her mother died of a fever that Lyra had tried to heal and failed because she was too young and too afraid, and no one had taught her what she was. Her father she had never known. The pack kept her because she was useful, the way a cracked bucket is useful. You do not fix it. You do not replace it. You simply use it until it falls apart. The grate above her rattled. Boots. Lyra. The voice was sharp, nasal. Pell, the beta's youngest enforcer, a wiry man with a face like a hatchet and breath that always smelled of aniseed. Lyra, I know you're down there. Cook's dead and the alpha wants to know where the brat is. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows. The baby stirred. Don't make me come down there. You know what happens when you make me come down there. She knew. The last time he had dragged her out by her hair and held her face against the kitchen stove until the skin on her cheek bubbled. The scar was still there, a pale smooth patch from her left cheekbone to her jaw, shaped like a handprint. She had healed it herself in the dark that night, pulling the worst of the damage inward, but she could not erase it completely without someone noticing, so she left just enough. Alpha Rennick doesn't want the pup, Pell continued, his boot scraping against the grate. It's a runt. No father claimed. He wants it disposed of. Quietly. That's your job tonight. The word disposed sat in her stomach like a stone. You've got until the bonfire burns down. After that I come looking. His boots moved away. The music swelled above. Someone was singing, off-key and drunk. Lyra looked down at the infant. His eyes were closed, his mouth working against nothing, searching for milk she did not have. His fingers, impossibly small, curled round the edge of the wool. He had dark hair, thick for a newborn, still matted with birth. He did not know his mother was dead. He did not know he was unwanted. He did not know that the pack that should have protected him had instead assigned a scarred scullery girl to carry him into the woods and leave him for the cold. She would not do it. She had done everything they asked. She had scrubbed their floors on bleeding knees. She had eaten their scraps, slept in the cupboard beneath the stairs where the hot water pipes leaked and the walls were furry with mildew. She had swallowed every insult, every blow, every casual cruelty delivered with the bored efficiency of people who did not consider her a person. But she would not kill a baby. Lyra stood. The water sloshed around her ankles. She tucked the infant inside her dress against her bare skin, feeling his heartbeat flutter against her ribs like a trapped bird, and she climbed out the maintenance hatch at the far end of the culvert, the one that opened onto the forest slope behind the packhouse. The night air hit her like a wall. Late autumn in the northern territories. Her breath came out in white plumes. The ground was cold enough to sting her bare feet, but not yet frozen. The soil soft and black beneath a carpet of dead pine needles that pricked her soles with every step. She could smell wood smoke from the bonfire, and beneath it the deeper forest scent of wet bark and mushroom rot, and the faintest sweetness of the last wild asters dying along the tree line. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she was going away. The Greymore territory bordered the Ashenvale neutral zone to the north, and no man's land between pack territories where roves and exiles scraped by in lean-to camps and abandoned ranger stations. Beyond that, the Iron Ridge Mountains. Beyond that, the territory of the Blood Court. Everyone knew about the Blood Court. Everyone feared it. Its Alpha King, Kael Draconis, had united 7 warring packs under a single banner in a campaign that lasted 3 years and left the mountain passes littered with bones. He was said to be enormous, scarred from throat to hip by a rival alpha's claws, with eyes the color of molten amber that could make a grown wolf drop to its knees. He had no Luna. He had no heirs. He ruled from a war count that moved with the seasons, never settling, never resting, as if the kingdom itself was a living thing that breathed and wore. And there was a rumor, a strange one told in whispers by the traders who passed through Greymoor's market square. They said the Alpha King kept a cradle in his war tent, an empty cradle carved from blackwood lined with wolf fur. No one knew why. No one dared ask. Lyra had heard the rumor once, scrubbing the market stalls after closing. She had thought it was sad, a cradle with no child, a king with no family. Now stumbling through the dark forest with a dead woman's baby against her chest, she thought of it again, and the thought landed differently. She walked north. She walked for 3 hours. The baby cried twice, and she calmed him by humming, a low, tuneless sound that vibrated in her chest and seemed to transfer warmth from her body to his. She could feel her energy draining, the way it always did when she used whatever lived inside her, that quiet heat she had never named. Her fingers tingled, her vision blurred at the edges. But the baby was warm. The baby was alive by the time she crossed the Ashenvale marker, a crumbling stone pillar carved with the neutral zone sigil. Her feet were bleeding. She could feel each individual cut, the sharp specific pain of pine bark and stone, the deeper ache of cold settling into muscle and bone. She was shivering so hard, her teeth clicked. The dress was stiff with dried blood, and the night wind cut through it as if it were not there. She smelled the camp before she saw it. Smoke, roasting meat, leather and horse sweat, and something metallic like a blacksmith's forge. And beneath it all, threaded through the cold air like a vein of gold in dark rock, a scent she had never encountered before. Cedar and black pepper and the ozone tang of lightning before it strikes. Her wolf stirred. This was notable because her wolf never stirred. The pack healer had declared her wolf dead when she was 13 after she failed 3 consecutive shifts during the adolescent moon trials. She had stood in the clearing with the other teenagers, stripped to her shift, shaking, willing her body to change, and nothing had happened. Nothing ever happened. The other wolves had shifted around her, bones cracking and reforming, fur rippling across skin, and she had stood there, human and small and alone, while the pack watched with a pity that curdled quickly into contempt. But now, something moved behind her ribs. Not a shift, not yet, but a presence, a stirring like an animal lifting its head from a long sleep. The camp materialized out of the darkness. Tents. Not might one, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread across a wide valley clearing, their canvas sides lit from within by lantern lights so they glowed amber against the black tree line. Horses picketed in long rows, cook fires burning low, sentries moving between the tents in pairs, their armor catching firelight. This was not a rogue camp. This was an army. She had walked straight into the blood court's forward position. A sentry spotted her before she could retreat. He was young, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a scar that bisected his right eyebrow. He stopped 10 paces away and stared at her as if she were a hallucination. "What in the mother's name?" he said. Lyra swayed on her feet. She was dimly aware that she must look like something from a nightmare, barefoot, blood-soaked, half-frozen, with a newborn tucked inside her dress. She opened her mouth to speak, and nothing came out. The world tilted. The sentry caught her before she hit the ground. His hands were rough but careful, and he smelled of leather and wood oil. "Medic," he shouted over his shoulder. "Get a medic, and tell the general there's a—" He trailed off, looking at her face, then at the baby, then back. "Tell the general there's a girl." She faded in and out, hands lifting her. Warmth, sudden and shocking after hours of cold, the inside of a tent, a wool blanket being wrapped around her. Voices layered over each other, urgent and low, someone trying to take the baby and her arms locking tight, refusing, a growl building in her throat that she did not recognize as her own. The voices backing off, then a new voice, different from the others, deeper. It did not shout, it did not rush. It simply spoke, and the tent went silent. "Leave her. She'll give up the child when she's ready. Not before." Lyra opened her eyes. He filled the tent entrance. That was her first thought. Not that he was tall, though he was easily 6.5 feet, but that he filled the space the way a thunderstorm fills a sky. Everything else became backdrop. He wore black leather armor over a dark wool tunic, no ceremonial embellishment, just functional plates scarred with use. His hair was black, cut short at the sides, longer on top, and a pale scar ran from beneath his left ear down the side of his neck and disappeared under his collar. His jaw was heavy, shadowed with stubble. His eyes were amber, not brown, not hazel, amber like tree resin with light trapped inside. Those eyes fixed on her. The scent hit her like a physical blow. Cedar and black pepper and ozone, but up close it was richer, deeper, layered with warmth like sun-heated stone and something wild underneath, animal and alive. Her wolf surged, actually surged, pressing against the inside of her skin, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt the pins and needles sensation that preceded a shift. It receded almost instantly, but it had been there. Unmistakable. "Mate," her wolf whispered, the first word it had ever spoken. Cale Draconis stopped walking. He was halfway across the tent, his hand extended to take a report from the medic, and he simply stopped, as if he had walked into glass. His nostrils flared, his pupils expanded until the amber was a thin ring around black. The report fell from the medic's hand. No one picked it up. "Out," Cale said. The medic hesitated. "Sire, she needs—" "Out. All of you. Now." They left. The tent flap fell closed, lantern light swayed, and the Alpha King of the Blood Corps stood 4 feet from a shivering, blood-covered scullery girl holding a newborn that was not hers, and he looked at her as if the entire war he had been fighting had just become irrelevant. "Oh, did this to you?" His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes earthquakes. "Did what?" Her voice was a croak. She had not spoken in hours. "The blood. The scar on your face. Your feet." He looked down. Her feet were leaving red smears on the fur-lined floor. "You've been walking barefoot in freezing temperatures for hours. You should be hypothermic. You're not." She did not have an answer for that. She had always run warmer than she should. "The child," he said. "Yours?" "No. His mother died. The pack wanted him disposed of." She used Pell's word deliberately, and she watched Cale's eyes change when she said it. Something shuddered behind the amber. Something controlled and dangerous. Which pack? Greymore. Rennis territory. Not a question. A filing. A man cataloging information for future use. And you. You're Greymore? I'm no one's. He took a step closer. Then another. He moved like something between a man and a predator, precise and unhurried, each step deliberate. He crouched in front of her, and even crouching he was enormous, his knees level with her chest, his face inches from hers. This close she could see the texture of the scar on his neck, the fine lines around his eyes, the way his pupils pulsed as he breathed her in. "You are not no one's," he said. His voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Your scent. Do you know what you smell like?" She shook her head. "Rain on hot stone, honey and iron, and underneath, tam." He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the amber was burning. "Underneath, you smell like the other half of my heartbeat." Not so dodge. The baby chose that moment to cry. The sound shattered the tension like a stone through glass, and Lyra startled, pulling back, clutching the infant tighter. Cal did not move. He watched her soothe the child, watched her hand cup the tiny skull, watched the way she tucked the wool tighter, and murmured something wordless and warm. "He needs milk," Lyra said. "He hasn't eaten since he was born." Cale stood. He crossed to the tent entrance in 2 strides and spoke through the canvas. "Bring goat's milk, warmed, a clean cloth for feeding, and the blackwood cradle from my quarters." She heard the sharp intake of breath from whoever was outside. The cradle, the famous empty cradle. "Sire, the cradle?" Did I stutter? Silence. Then rapid footsteps retreating. Cale turned back to her. "You need a healer. Food, Mao, warm clothes. I'm going to have someone attend to you, and you are going to let them. The child will stay with you. No one will take him." "Why?" "Because he's yours now, and you are mine, and what belongs to my mate belongs to me." She should have argued. She should have been afraid. Every instinct she had developed in 19 years of survival told her to be cautious, to distrust power, to expect the cost hidden behind every kindness. But her wolf was doing something extraordinary inside her chest, something that felt like unfurling, like a flower opening in time-lapse, and the warmth spreading through her body had nothing to do with the blankets or the lantern or the tent. "I don't even know your name," she said, and immediately felt stupid because everyone knew his name. Everyone in every territory, from the southern marshes to the frozen tundra, knew his name. But he answered as if it were a reasonable question. "Kyle. Just Kyle. The rest of it, the titles, the blood-court nonsense, that's for them." He gestured vaguely toward the camp outside. "For you, it's just Kyle." The cradle arrived. 2 soldiers carried it in, struggling slightly with the weight. It was blackwood, dark as a starless sky, carved with wolf motifs along the rails, lined with silver-gray wolf fur so soft it looked like smoke. They set it beside the cot where Lyra sat and retreated without meeting her eyes. A woman followed, a camp healer by her leather apron, carrying warm milk in a ceramic bottle with a cloth nipple and a basin of warm water and clean rags. Lyra fed the baby first. He latched onto the cloth nipple with desperate hunger, his tiny hands clenching and unclenching, his eyes squeezed shut with concentration. She watched his throat work as he swallowed and felt something crack open inside her chest, something she had been holding closed for a very long time. Cale watched from across the tent. He had settled into a camp chair, his long legs stretched before him, and he should have looked ridiculous, this enormous scarred watching a scullery girl feed an orphaned infant. He did not look ridiculous. He looked like a man who had just found the thing he had been missing. The cradle, Lyra said, when the baby had drunk his fill and fallen into a milk-drunk sleep, his lips still working against nothing. Why did you already have it? Hyle's jaw tightened. For the first time, something crossed his face that was not authority or desire. It was older, raw. Loss, my sister, he said. Sarah. She was pregnant when the border war started. 8 months along. She was traveling to the safe hold at Iron Ridge when her convoy was ambushed. Greymoor raiders. Renessix wolves. The name landed like a punch. Lyra's hands went still on the baby. They killed her escort, took her. By the time we found the camp, she had delivered. The child was gone. Sarah was. He stopped. His throat moved. Sarah was gone too. Cale. Not. I had the cradle made for the child I was going to find. I've had scouts in every territory for 2 years. I've searched every orphanage, every rogue camp, every pack that ever dealt with Rennick. Nothing. His eyes moved to the baby sleeping in Lyra's arms. And then you walk out of his territory barefoot and bleeding, carrying a newborn he wanted disposed of. This isn't your sister's child, Lyra said gently. Marin was the cook. She was human. No wolf blood. I know. His voice was rough. But the cradle shouldn't stay empty forever. The camp healer cleaned her feet. The cuts were deep, embedded with pine needles and grit, and Lyra gritted her teeth as each one was extracted, and the wounds flashed with warm salt water. The healer paused at her face, studying the burn scar with professional interest. This is old, the healer said, but it healed strangely, almost too well. No keloid, no contracture. What treated it? Nothing, Lyra said. It healed on its own. The healer's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. She bandaged the feet, left a pot of salve, and departed with a bow toward Kyle that was more reflex than formality. Lyra laid the baby in the blackwood cradle. He settled into the wolf fur with a small sigh, his face going slack and peaceful, and she tucked the wool around him and stood there looking down at him for a long time. Her hands were shaking, not from cold anymore, from something else entirely, from the disorienting vertigo of a life that had been one thing for 19 years suddenly becoming another thing in the space of 3 hours. You should sleep, Kyle said from his chair. I can't. You've walked for hours in freezing weather, delivered a baby, and your body is running on whatever emergency reserve it's been burning since you left Greymoor. You need to sleep. If I sleep, I'll wake up, and this won't be real. He stood. He crossed the tent and stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough that the cedar and pepper scent wrapped around her like a physical thing. He did not touch her. I will be here when you wake up, he said. I will be here every time you wake up for the rest of your life. That is not a promise. It is a fact, like gravity, like the tide. I am your mate, and you are mine, and the only question left is whether you're ready to believe it. She looked up at him. The amber eyes were steady, patient, burning with something that was not urgency but certainty. The certainty of a man who had led armies and toppled kingdoms and waited for years and was perfectly willing to wait more. I'm not ready, she said honestly. Then I'll wait. He stepped back. He gestured to the cot. She lay down and her body betrayed her immediately, the exhaustion rushing in like water through a broken dam. The last thing she saw before she closed her eyes was Cale settling back into his chair, pulling a stack of reports onto his lap, his amber eyes moving to the cradle where the baby slept, then to her, then to the tent entrance as if measuring every possible angle of approach. Standing guard, she slept. She woke to the smell of porridge and wood smoke. The tent was bright with morning light filtering through the canvas, turning everything amber and gold. The baby was awake in the cradle, not crying but making small exploratory sounds, his fists waving above him like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. Cale was gone. In his place sat a woman in her 50s with iron-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same mountain the camp occupied. She wore the practical wool and leather of a senior camp attendant, and she was knitting something impossibly small and soft from pale grey yarn. "He'll be back in an hour," the woman said without looking up from her needles. "Council meeting." He tried to cancel it. The general threatened to resign again. "Eat." A tray sat on the camp table. Porridge with honey, dried apple slices, a mug of something that steamed. Lyra sat up, and every muscle in her body screamed. Her feet throbbed inside their bandages. Her shoulders ached from carrying the baby, but the smell of the food pulled her forward with a force that was nearly gravitational. She ate all of it, and the woman, whose name was Helda, refilled the porridge without comment and added a thick slice of bread with butter, and Lyra ate that too. She had not had butter in 3 years. The taste of it, rich and slightly salty, made her eyes sting. "You're the one, then," Helda said, still knitting. "He said he found his mate. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There hasn't. I've known that boy since he was 6 years old and couldn't tie his own boots. I've seen him fight. I've seen him bury his sister. I've never seen him look at anything the way he looked at you when he carried you in here last night. He didn't carry me. He did. After you fell asleep, moved you from the medic's tent to his own quarters. The whole camp saw. The Alpha King walking through camp with a blood-covered girl in his arms and a newborn tucked against his chest. You could have heard a pin drop. Helda's needles clicked. He's not a gentleman, Lyra. He's not a patient man or a kind man in the way poets mean it. But he has been waiting for you, and now that you're here, the whole mountain is going to know it." Lyra looked at the cradle. The baby had found his own fist and was sucking on it with serious concentration. "I maimed him," she said, "in my head, while I was walking. Is that... but... what did you name him? Alder. Like the tree. They grow in wet places, in bad soil. They're the first thing that comes back after a fire." "Not joke." Elder looked up from her knitting for the first time. Her eyes were grey and sharp, and something in them softened, just barely, like ice thinning at the edges of a spring pond. "That's a good name," she said. Cale returned, not in an hour, but in 40 minutes, pushing through the tent flap with a controlled energy that suggested the council meeting had not gone well. He stopped when he saw Lyra sitting up, eating, the baby in the crook of her arm, and something in his expression shifted. The war fell off him like a coat. "You have color," he said. "Good." "Here she ate 3 bowls," Helda reported, standing and tucking her knitting into a pocket. "The child's been fed twice. I'll send up more milk at noon." She passed Cale at the entrance, paused, and said quietly, "She named the pup. Cale's eyes moved to the baby. "What name?" "Holder," Lyra said. She braced herself for objection, for the assumption that she had no right to name a child that was not biologically hers, not officially claimed. "Older," Kyle repeated. He said it carefully, like he was tasting it. Then he crossed the tent, crouched beside the cradle, and looked down at the infant with an expression that would have made half his enemies doubt their intelligence reports. It was tender, specifically painfully tender, the kind of tenderness that only exists in men who have lost something and are terrified of losing again. "Hello, Alder," he said. The baby grabbed his finger. Cale's hand dwarfed the child's entire body. Those battle-scarred knuckles split and healed and split again, and those impossibly tiny fingers wrapping around the smallest one. Lyra's wolf hummed. The days that followed existed in a strange, suspended state, like the held breath between lightning and thunder. Cale gave her his tent. He slept in the command tent, though Helder told her he barely slept at all, spending the nights reviewing troop positions and patrol reports, and occasionally standing outside his own tent in the dark. Not entering, just standing there, breathing her scent through the canvas. She was given clothes, proper clothes, not servants' rags. Wool trousers, a linen shirt, a leather vest lined with rabbit fur. Boots that actually fit, with thick soles and worn soft leather that cupped her heels. She stood in them for a full minute, flexing her toes, feeling the strange luxury of a shoe that did not pinch or leak. She was given food. 3 meals a day, regular and substantial, brought by a rotating cast of camp workers who treated her with cautious deference. She ate at first with the frantic efficiency of someone accustomed to having food taken away. By the 3rd day she had slowed enough to taste things. The herb in the stew was thyme. The bread was sourdough, dense and tangy. The cheese was aged, with crystals in it that crunched between her teeth. She had never eaten cheese with crystals. But she was not a prisoner, and she was not a queen. She existed in an undefined space, the Alpha King's mate who had not accepted the bond, and the camp did not know what to make of her. She caught the glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, the soldiers who studied her with open curiosity, and something else, something measuring, the way you evaluate a structural weakness in a wall. On the 4th day she left the tent while Kale was in council. She carried Alder in a sling that Helder had fashioned from soft linen, and she walked through the camp with her chin up and her heart hammering. The camp was larger than she had realized. Hundreds of tents organized in precise concentric rings around the central command area. A forge belching heat and sparks. A mess hall big enough to seat 300. A training ground where wolves shifted and humans sparred in rotating pairs. She found the medical tent by its smell, astringent and herbal, a sharpness that cut through the ambient wood smoke. She stood outside it for a long time, listening to the sounds inside. A man groaning, the clink of instruments, a healer giving quiet instructions. Then she went in. The head medic was a lean, grey-haired woman named Silver, with steady hands and circles under her eyes that spoke of chronic understaffing. She looked up when Lyra entered, assessed her in a single sweep, and said, "If you're here about the baby's feeding schedule, come back at 2. "I'm not," Lyra said. "I'm here to help." Silver's eyebrows rose. "Help? I know herbs. I know wound care. I know—" She hesitated, standing at the edge of the thing she had hidden her whole life. "I know how to reduce a fever faster than willow bark. Everyone thinks they know field medicine. Your man over there." Lyra nodded toward a soldier lying on a cot, his left arm wrapped to the shoulder, his face gray with pain. "The wound is going septic. You've been packing it with honey and garlic, which is correct, but the infection is deeper than the tissue. It's in the bone. You can smell it, that sweet rotten smell under the garlic. It needs the limb heated from the inside, drawing the infection to the surface, so the poultice can actually reach it." Silver stared at her. "How can you smell that from the doorway?" Lyra crossed the tent, set Alder's sling on a clean cot, and placed her hand on the soldier's bandaged arm. She closed her eyes. The heat came, as it always did, rising from the center of her chest and flowing down her arm and into her palm. She could feel the infection. A dark, hot mass of wrong nestled against the bone, and she coaxed it upward, drawing it through the tissue the way you draw poison from a snake bite, pulling, until the soldier gasped and the bandage darkened with fluid. She pulled a hand away. Her fingertips were white. The soldier stared at his arm. The gray had left his face. "What did you just do?" Silver was already unwrapping the bandage. The wound beneath was weeping, but the fluid was clear now, not the milky yellow of infection. She pressed along the bone. The soldier winced but did not scream. "The bone heat is normal," Silver said slowly. This is clean. This was not clean an hour ago." She looked at Lyra. "What are you?" "I don't know," Lyra said, and that, at least, was the truth. Word spread. It always does in a camp. By evening, Lyra had treated 4 more soldiers, a sprained wrist that she realigned with her hands, a persistent cough that she soothed by pressing her palm to the man's chest and humming, a burn from the forge that she cooled with a touch, and a deep gash on a horse's flank that the animal handler had been about to cauterize. Each time the heat flowed, and each time the healing happened faster and more completely than it should. Each time it cost her. By the 5th patient she was swaying, her vision tunneling, a deep bone-tiredness settling into her joints. She sat down on the edge of a cot and pressed her hands between her knees to stop their shaking. That was how Kyle found her. He came through the medical tent entrance like a weather system, the air pressure in the room shifting tangibly when he appeared. His eyes found her immediately, locked on, and she watched his expression cycle through relief, concern, anger, and something possessive and desperate that made her wolf whine. "You've been healing," he said. Not a question. They needed help. They needed help. You've trained yourself. He was in front of her in 2 strides, crouching, his hands on her knees. His palms were warm through the wool of her trousers. Your hands are shaking. Your scent has changed. You smell like... He paused, breathed. You smell exhausted, as if exhaustion has a scent. I'm fine. You are very clearly not fine. Kale, those men were in pain. One of them would have lost his arm, and I would rather 100 men lose their arms than see you harm yourself. His voice was low, fierce, cracking at the edges. Do you understand that? Do you have any concept of what you are? I'm an omega with a defective wolf and a trick I can't explain. You are not an omega. He said it with absolute certainty, the way he might say the sun rises in the east. Your wolf is not defective, and what you do is not a trick. Silver has been a field medic for 30 years, and she has never seen anything like what you did today. She thinks you're a healer born. The words meant nothing to Lyra. They're extinct, Kel continued. Or they were supposed to be. Wolves born with the ability to heal others through direct contact. The last known healer born died 200 years ago. They were hunted systematically, because a wolf who can heal can also harm, and the packs that controlled healer born wielded them as weapons. I've never harmed anyone. No. You've been scrubbing floors and hiding what you are because the one time you let it slip, a pack healer threatened to cut out your tongue. She flinched. How did you know that? I didn't, but I've seen enough abused wolves to recognize the pattern. You don't hide a gift that large unless someone taught you it was dangerous. He lifted one of her hands, turned it over, studied the palm. How long have you been able to do this? Always. Since I was small, I used to heal cuts on the kitchen cats. I thought everyone could. His thumb traced a line across her palm. The touch sent a current through her that had nothing to do with healing, a warm liquid pull that started in her hand and spread through her arm and chest and settled deep in her stomach. Her wolf stirred, pressed forward, and for the second time she felt the pins and needles of a shift, stronger this time, lasting longer. Kale's eyes widened. Your wolf, he breathed. I can feel her. She's waking up. She's been waking up since I met you. The confession hung in the air between them. Kale's hand tightened on hers, his eyes burned amber, the pupils blown wide. And as Wolf was right there behind his face, she could see it, a massive presence pressing against his skin from the inside. Come with me, he said. He took her to a clearing behind the camp, up a trail that switched back through old-growth pines so tall they blocked the stars. The moonlight came through in silver columns, illuminating a flat stone plateau carpeted with moss and lichen. The air was sharp and clean, pine resin and snow melt and the distant mineral smell of the mountain itself. This is the moon clearing, he said. Every wolf in this camp shifted for the first time here. The stone holds the energy of hundreds of shifts. If your wolf is ready, this is where it will happen. I can't shift. I've tried. For years, you tried in Greymore, surrounded by wolves who told you were nothing. You tried while you were hiding what you are, while your wolf was suppressed by fear and survival and the constant effort of pretending to be less than you are. He stepped back, giving her space. Try here, where no one is watching but me. Where you are safe. You're the Alpha King. You're the least safe person I could be alone with. He laughed. It transformed his face entirely, broke the harsh lines into something younger and warmer, and she realized with a start that he was not much older than her, maybe 25, that the weight of the crown and the war had aged him the way wind ages stone. Fair point, he said, but your wolf seems to disagree. Her wolf did disagree. Her wolf was pressing against her skin so hard it almost hurt. A pressure that was not pain but urgency, insistence, a creature trapped for 19 years finally seeing an open door. Lyra closed her eyes. She reached for the heat. Not the healing heat, the one she sent outward. The other one, the deeper one, but the one she had always been afraid to touch. The molten core beneath the gentle warmth. The thing that felt like it could burn down mountains as she let it. She let it. The shift came not in the slow, controlled way she had seen other wolves manage it, bone by bone, limb by limb. It came like an avalanche. One moment she was standing on the stone in her borrowed boots, and the next the world was splitting open, her body reorganizing itself with a sound like tearing silk, her vision fracturing into something wider and sharper and infinitely more vivid. Colors she had never seen, sounds she had never heard. The heartbeat of a rabbit in the underbrush 40 yards away, the rustle of an owl's feathers 100 feet up. She was enormous. That was the first surprise. She'd expected to be small, a gray wolf maybe, the standard Omega build. She was not. She was almost as large as Kyle's wolf form, which she could sense without seeing because his wolf was roaring inside him, responding to hers. Her fur was silver white, almost luminous in the moonlight, and where other wolves had standard coloring, she had markings, dark traceries along her spine and around her eyes, like the patterns of a healer's herbs drawn in ink. But the truly remarkable thing, the thing that made Cale's breath catch, was the light. Faint, barely visible, a soft glow emanating from her fur like moonlight trapped in snow. The healer-born mark. The wolves in the old texts had been described as moon-touched, their fur holding light the way a lantern holds flame. Lyra threw back her head and howled. Not a sad sound, not a lonely sound. A sound of arrival, a sound of becoming. 19 years of silence, of suppression, of being told she was less, ending in a single sustained note that echoed off the mountainside and rolled down into the valley, and woke every wolf in the camp below. They howled back, hundreds of them. A cascading chorus of recognition, wolf after wolf lifting their voice to answer hers, and the mountain sang. Cale shifted. He was massive, coal-black, his fur thick and rough with a silver-gray undercoat that caught the light. He was scarred even in wolf form, pale lines across his shoulders and flank. He approached her slowly, head low, not in submission but in awe. His wolf touched his nose to hers, and the bond snapped into place like a broken bone setting. She felt it, not as metaphor, but as physical sensation, a taut silver thread connecting her chest to his, vibrating with warmth and recognition and something older than language. Her wolf and his wolf circled each other on the moonlit stone, and for a long time that was enough. Just that. Two wolves who had been alone, no longer alone, on a mountain that had been waiting for them. They shifted back near dawn. Lyra was naked and shaking and laughing, a sound she did not recognize because she had not laughed in years. Not really, not from her belly. Cale wrapped his cloak around her and pulled her against his chest, and she did not resist. His heart beat against her cheek, slow and steady, and she pressed her palm flat against it and felt the warmth flow between them. Not healing this time, just connection. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Tell me. I think I know what happened to your sister's child." He went very still, The heartbeat under her palm did not change, but his breathing did, a barely perceptible catch. "When I was 11, she said, "the year my mother died, a woman came to Greymore in the middle of the night. She was dying. She had a wound in her side, deep, and she was carrying a bundle. My mother took her in. She died before morning. The bundle was a baby, a boy." Kyle said nothing. The pack took the baby. Alpha Rennick said it was a road child, no claim, pack property. He gave it to one of the servants to raise. The servant was. She swallowed. The servant was Merrin. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, pressurized, like a room filling with water. "You're saying," Cale said, and his voice was the quietest she had ever heard it, "that the baby in the cradle, the baby you carried out of Greymore, the baby you named Alder, I'm saying that Maren couldn't have been his birth mother. The timing never worked. She said she found him early, but everyone knew she hadn't been pregnant. The pack just stopped talking about it. And the woman who brought him, my mother drew the markings on her arms before she died. She had them tattooed. Yira traced a pattern on Cale's chest, a series of interlocking wolves. Like that, the blood-caught crest. His voice broke on the last word. Just cracked, like a frozen branch in the sun, and Cale Draconis, the Alpha King who had united 7 packs and terrified a continent, pressed his face into Lyra's hair and wept. She held him. She did not tell him it was okay because she did not know if it was. She held him and let the heat flow from her palms into his skin, and his wolf howled inside him, a long broken note of grief and hope so tangled together they were indistinguishable. When he lifted his head, his eyes were red, but his jaw was set. "Rennick knew," he said. "He knew that child was blood-caught. He kept him as leverage or insurance, or simply because taking from me gave him satisfaction. He killed my sister and stole her son and raised him in a servant's kitchen. You don't know for certain. I will know for certain. I will go to Greymore, and I will ask Rennick directly, and he will tell me everything, because I will give him no other option." He pulled back, looked at her, and his face was terrible in its clarity. "But first, you need to know what comes next. If Alder is Sarah's son, he is my nephew. He is the heir to the blood court. And you, his mother by choice and claim, are the only person in this world he belongs to, which means the blood court needs you. I need you, not just as my mate Lyra, as my queen. I was scrubbing floors a week ago, and I was a 16-year-old boy with a borrowed sword when the first war started. The job finds the person. It does not wait for the person to feel ready." She thought about the culvert, the ice water, Pell's boots on the grate. Disposed of. She thought about 19 years of keeping her head down, her gift hidden, her wolf silent. She thought about the look on Silver's face when the infection cleared, the soldier flexing his healed arm, the hundreds of wolves howling in answer to her voice. "I'll need to learn," she said. "Everything, politics, protocol, how to run a war camp, how to stop you from killing Rennick before you get the information you need." The ghost of a smile. "Halder can teach you the first 3. The 4th may be beyond anyone's capability." Kyle, yes. The bond. I accept it. He did not roar. He did not grab her. He closed his eyes, and the relief that moved through his body was visible. A physical release of tension that had been held so long it had become structural. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. When he opened his eyes, they were bright, wet, blazing amber. "Say it again. I accept the bond. I accept you. I'm terrified, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I still don't entirely believe this is real, but I accept it." He kissed her, not gently, not carefully, with the accumulated force of years of waiting and a war that had been missing its reason and a cradle that had been missing its occupant. His hand cradled the back of her skull, His mouth was warm and tasted of pine tea and something darker, and her wolf surged, and his wolf surged, and his wolf surged, and the bond between them flared so bright she felt it in her teeth. They returned to camp as the sun crested the mountain. Cale carried Alder in one arm, the baby awake and alert, his dark eyes tracking the play of light through the pine canopy. Lyra walked beside him in his cloak, her silver-white hair changed after the shift, catching the dawn light. The camp was already awake. The soldiers, the attendants, the healers and cooks and blacksmiths, they all stopped what they were doing and watched. Cale did not address them. He did not make a speech. He simply walked through the center of camp with his mate at his side and his sister's child in his arms, and every wolf they passed bowed their head, not because they were ordered to, because they could feel it, the bond, the shift in power, the pack recognizing what was always meant to be, that Greymore was not finished with her. The delegation arrived 3 days later, 7 wolves on horseback, led by Pell himself. He rode into camp with the casual arrogance of a man who does not understand the room he has entered, his spine straight, his hatchet face arranged in an expression of diplomatic neutrality. He carried a sealed letter from Alpha Rennick. Lyra saw him from the medical tent, where she was treating young Wolf's fractured collarbone. Her hands froze, the heat in her palms guttered like a candle in wind. Pell did not see her. He dismounted in the command area and requested an audience with the Alpha King regarding the matter of the stolen pack asset. Stolen pack asset. That was what she was. Cale received the delegation in the war tent. Lyra was not present, but Helda was, knitting in her corner, as she always did during councils, and Helda reported every word. Pell had presented his case with the rehearsed smoothness of a man reading from a prepared script. The Omega called Lyra was Greymore property, bound by pact law. She had fled with a pack-born infant, an act of theft. Alpha Rennick demanded her return along with the child, and offered in exchange a formal non-aggression treaty and a shipment of winter grain. Cale had listened. He had listened to the entire speech without interruption, sitting in his campaign chair with his fingers steepled, his amber eyes fixed on Pell with an attention that Helda described as deeply unsettling. When Pell finished, Cale said, "The Omega you describe is my fated mate. The child you describe is the son of my murdered sister, stolen from her body by Greymore raiders. You have delivered this information to me as if it were a negotiating position. It is not. It is a confession." The color left Pell's face. "You have 12 hours to return to Greymore and deliver my terms to Rennick. He will present himself at the neutral border in 3 days with a full accounting of every raid his wolves conducted into Blood Court territory. He will bring every document, every record, every piece of evidence related to the child's origin. And he will kneel. Alpha Rennick kneels to no one. Alpha Rennick has not yet met me." Pell left. He rode hard and did not look back, and Lyra, watching from the medical tent entrance with Alder on her hip, felt a grim satisfaction that immediately curdled into fear. She knew Rennis. She knew what a cornered wolf did. She was right to be afraid. The attack came not in 3 days, but in 2, not at the neutral border, but at the camp itself, and not from the direction anyone expected. Rennick had allies. The Greymore pack had been trading with the southern marshes for years, and the southern alpha, a wolf named Varro, had his own reasons for wanting the Blood Court weakened. Together they had assembled a force of 300 wolves and sent them through the mountain passes at night. Lyra woke to the sound of the war horn. 3 blasts, long and low, the emergency signal that meant breach of perimeter. She was on her feet before the 3rd blast ended. Alder scooped from the cradle, her heart slamming against her ribs. Cal was already gone. She could feel him through the bond, a distant roar of fury and focus, and she could feel his wolf, massive and black and moving fast, tearing through the tree line toward the western approach. Elder appeared at the tent entrance, a short sword in one hand that she held with the easy grip of someone who had used it before. "Medical tent," Helder said. "Now. The wounded will start arriving in minutes, and Silver needs you." Out. Mao. Lyra ran. She ran through the camp with Alder against her chest, the night air sharp with smoke and the metallic tang of fear. Wolves streamed past her in both directions, some shifted, some still human, shouting orders, grabbing weapons. The western horizon glowed orange. Fire arrows. The medical tent was chaos organized by Silver's iron will. Cots were being set up in rows, supplies laid out on trestle tables, water being boiled over portable stoves. Lyra handed order to a young attendant with instructions to stay in the back corner behind the supply crates, and she went to work. The wounded came in waves, burns first from the fire arrows, and lacerations, claw and sword and tooth, then the bad ones, the gut wounds and the crushed ribs and the arterial bleeds that turned the floor slippery with blood. Lyra moved between them, her hands glowing with the faint light that she could no longer hide, pulling infections from fresh wounds before they could set in, knitting torn muscle, cooling burns. The cost was enormous. Each healing took more from her than the last, but the alternative was watching them die, and she could not do that. She was treating a young female wolf, barely 16, who had taken a sword thrust through the shoulder when the tent wall exploded inward. Not literally. A wolf came through it, a massive grey wolf with a white blaze on its chest, tearing through the canvas like paper. It landed in the medical tent among the wounded. Snarling, and behind it came two more, smaller, flanking. Greymore wolves. She recognized the grey one. Dax, Rennick's enforcer, the one who had held her down while Pell pressed her face to the stove. He recognized her, too. Even in wolf form, she could see the recognition in his yellow eyes, the way they fixed on her and narrowed. He had not come for the wounded. He had come for her. Lyra stood. The heat in her hands was not the healing warmth. It was the other one, the deep one, the one she had been afraid to touch her entire life. "Don't," she said. Dax lunged. She did not think. She reacted. The power left her in a wave, not directed at the wound like healing, but outward. A pulse of raw energy that lifted Dax off his feet and slammed him into the tent pole with a crack that was either the pole or his ribs. The two flanking wolves yelped and scrambled backward, their ears flat, their tails tucked. The pulse radiated outward through the tent, and the wounded wolves on their cots gasped, not in pain but in relief. The ambient healing energy washing over them like warm water, closing cuts, easing pain, knitting bone. Lyra stood in the center of the medical tent, her hands blazing with white light, her silver hair whipping in a wind that existed only around her, and every wolf in the tent, every patient, every healer, every attacker went still. Dax shifted back to human. He was on the ground, naked, one arm clutched against broken ribs, and he looked up at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not cruelty, not contempt. Fear. "What are you?" he whispered. She did not answer. She was already turning away, because through the bond she felt something terrible. Kale's pain, sharp and bright and sudden like a blade finding its mark. She ran. Barefoot again, just like that first night, the ground cold and sharp beneath her, but this time she was not running away. She was running toward. The bond was a compass needle pulling her west through the burning perimeter and the clash of wolves in the darkness, and she found him in a clearing where the pines had been shattered by the fighting. Kale was in human form, on one knee, his hand pressed against his left side where blood was welling between his fingers, dark and fast. 3 wolves circled him, and behind them, still in human form, watching with arms folded and a smile that did not reach his eyes, was Alpha Rennick. He was smaller than she expected. That was the first absurd thought. After 19 years of terror, After the stove and the culvert and the scrub brush and the hunger, the architect of all of it was a medium-built man in his 40s with thinning brown hair and a pointed chin and eyes the color of dirty ice. He wore fine riding leather and a cloak with a silver pin, and he looked, in that moment, like a mid-level bureaucrat at a company Christmas party. Not a monster, just a man who had decided long ago that some people existed to be used. "There she is," Rennick said. "The pack's little scullery rat. You've been busy." Lyra did not look at him. She looked at Cale. His amber eyes were wide with pain and something else, fury at her presence here, terror for her safety, the warring impulses of a mate who wanted to protect, and a king who was bleeding out on the forest floor. "Don't," Cale said. "Run. Take Alder and run." "I'm not going to do that." "Lyra." I said no. She walked forward. The three wolves growled. She did not stop. The heat was building in her again, that deep power, but she did not release it. Instead, she walked past the circling wolves, knelt beside Cale, and pressed her hands against the wound in his side. The healing was different this time. Not the gentle warmth she used on soldiers. This was a torrent, a river of energy that poured from her into him, finding the severed muscle and the nicked artery and the cracked rib beneath, and mending them not with the patient precision of a healer, but with the desperate force of a mate refusing to let go. Cale's hand found her wrist. "You'll drain yourself completely." "Lyra, stop. No." The wound closed. The bleeding stopped. She felt the artery seal, felt the muscle knit, felt the rib fuse along its fracture line. The energy course hit her like a wall. Her vision went white. Her hands dropped from his side. The Cale was rising. He was on his feet, his hands still locked around her wrist, and his eyes were not amber anymore. They were gold, pure, molten gold, the eyes of an alpha in full command, and the three wolves circling them dropped to the ground as if struck. Not struck, forced, enforced. The alpha command radiated from Kyle like heat from a furnace, the pure dominance of a king who had absorbed his mate's power and mixed it with his own fury, and the wolves pressed their bellies to the earth and whimpered. Rennick took a step back. It was small, involuntary, the first honest movement Lyra had ever seen him make. For one instant his face cracked, and underneath the bureaucratic cruelty there was something else, something old and tired and almost regretful. He looked at Lyra, and his expression flickered. "Your mother," he said. "She came to me once. Before you were born, she asked me to protect her, said she was carrying a child that would be important." He paused. "I told her the pack had no resources for unwed mothers, but I let her stay. That was more than most would have done." It was not an apology. It was not even remorse. It was a man standing at the edge of his own destruction, looking back at the path of small refusals that had led him there, and acknowledging just barely that there had been a moment where he could have turned. "Your mother died quietly," he said. "She didn't suffer. I made sure of that. And that was the flicker, that one detail. The single insufficient act of mercy in a lifetime of calculated neglect. She did not forgive him for it, but she filed it away, and years later, when she thought of Rennick, she would think of that moment too, and it would complicate her hatred in ways she was not entirely comfortable with. Cale did not share her ambivalence. "You killed my sister," he said. "You stole her child. You enslaved my mate. And now you've attacked my camp and wounded my soldiers." He released Lyra's wrist and stepped forward. "You will answer for all of it. But first you will tell me the truth about the boy. Is the child Sarah's son?" Rennick's jaw worked. The dirty ice eyes moved from Cale to Lyra and back. "Yes," he said, "the woman who brought him was your sister's handmaiden. She was dying from the wounds my wolves gave her during the ambush. She begged, said the child was blood court royalty. I didn't believe her then." His mouth twisted. I believe her now. Cal moved. One moment he was standing beside Lyra. The next he was in front of Rennick, his hand around the smaller man's throat, lifting him off the ground with the casual ease of a man picking up a sack of grain. Rennick's feet kicked. His hands clawed at Cale's wrist. His face went red, then purple. Cale. Lyra's voice was steady. Information first, then justice. The war ended that night. It ended not with a treaty or a negotiation, but with Rennis's wolves watching their alpha dangle from the Alpha King's fist and making, collectively, the most practical decision of their lives. They surrendered. Tharo's southern wolves, seeing their ally defeated, retreated through the mountain passes before dawn. Rennick was brought before the combined packs 3 days later, in the moon clearing on the stone plateau where Lyra had first shifted. His hands were bound, his fine riding leathers were dirty and torn. His face was the blank mask of a man who has exhausted his options. The trial was brief. Rennick presented no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. The raider records, the handmaiden's body recovered from a shallow grave near the Greymore border, the testimony of 3 former Greymore soldiers who had participated in the ambush on Sarah's convoy and chose confession over loyalty. Kay pronounced the sentence. Death, Bukne. Standard for crimes against a royal bloodline. But Lyra asked for a modification. She stood before the assembled wolves, Alder in her arms, and she asked that the execution be delayed by 1 day so that every member of the former Greymore pack could witness it. Not as cruelty, as clarity. So that no one could later claim they had not known. So that no one could later say they had just been following orders. Cale looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. The marking ceremony happened at midnight, in their tent with no audience. Lyra had expected pageantry, the public claiming that the stories described, the bite on the neck before the pack. She had been wrong. Cale had asked her what she wanted, and she had said, "Just us." Het him up there. He marked her at the junction of her neck and shoulder, his teeth breaking the skin in a sharp, bright pain that dissolved immediately into warmth, into connection, into a sensation of falling and being caught simultaneously. She marked him in the same place and tasted his blood, salt and iron and cedar, and felt the bond solidify from a silver thread into something stronger, something structural, a load-bearing wall in the architecture of their lives. Afterward, lying on the camp cot that was too narrow for both of them, tangled together with the gracelessness of 2 people whose bodies had not yet learned each other's geography, Lyra pressed her ear to his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "Alder needs a naming ceremony," she said. "A proper one, blood court tradition." "That boy, Fade Thou. Helder will insist on organizing it. She's been knitting him a naming blanket since the day you arrived. The pale gray one, she's on her 3rd. She keeps deciding they're not good enough." Lyra smiled. The expression still felt new on her face, an unfamiliar muscle being asked to work after a long atrophy. "Cale. Mum. Your sister. Do you think she knew he would end up here? With us? He was quiet for a long time." His hand moved slowly along her spine, tracing the markings that had appeared on her skin after the shift, the same dark traceries that her wolf form carried. "I think she would have wanted him to have what she couldn't give him," he said. "A mother who chose him, a cradle that wasn't empty." The camp moved with the first snow. Lyra had expected to be left behind, installed in some permanent hold while the war machine rolled on. But Kyle had looked at her as if she had suggested breathing underwater. "The camp moves," he said. "We move." So she moved. She rode beside him at the head of the column, Alder in a sling against her chest, and the blood-caught wolves marched behind them through the mountain pass in a line that stretched back further than she could see. The snow came down in fat, wet flakes that clung to her silver hair and melted on her skin, and the world was white and grey, and the dark green of pines bowed under winter weight. 6 months later, in the permanent hold at Iron Ridge that Cale had finally agreed to establish, not as a concession to permanence, but because Alder had started crawling and camp life presented too many opportunities for a curious infant to find sharp objects, Lyra stood in the great hall and accepted the pack's formal recognition. It was not a coronation. Cale refused the word. It was, he said, an acknowledgement. The pack acknowledging what the bond had already established. Lyra stood in a dress of dark blue wool with silver thread at the hem, her hair braided with small white flowers that Helda had gathered from the mountain meadow, and 300 wolves bowed. She did not cry. She had expected to cry, had braced for it, but the tears did not come. Instead, she felt something quieter and more durable settle into her bones. Not happiness exactly, recognition. The feeling of arriving at a place you did not know you were traveling to and finding it already familiar. After the ceremony, when the great hall had emptied and the last of the celebration fires were burning low, she found Cale in the nursery. He was sitting on the floor beside the blackwood cradle, which had been moved from tent to tent to tent, and finally here, to this stone room with its thick walls and wide windows and the smell of cedarwood and beeswax. Alder was asleep inside it, his dark hair curling against the wolf fur, one hand stretched out as if reaching for something in his dreams. Cale had a book in his lap. He was reading to the baby, though the baby was asleep, and the book was a military history of the border campaigns, wholly unsuitable for an infant. "He can't understand any of that," Lyra said from the doorway. "He likes the sound of my voice. He told me. He's 7 months old. He can't talk. He communicated it non-verbally." She crossed the room and sat beside him on the stone floor. The fire in the hearth had burnt to embers, casting the room in a low, warm glow that turned the blackwood cradle to amber and Cale's eyes to gold. She leaned against his shoulder. He turned a page. "Chapter 12, he read, his deep voice pitched low and even, almost hypnotic. The Eastern Flank engagement and its consequences for supply line management. Alder sighed in his sleep, his fingers curled tighter around the edge of the wolf fur. The fire popped. A log shifted, sending a brief shower of sparks up the chimney, and for a moment the room glowed brighter. Warm and contained, the three of them held inside it like figures in a painting, like a scene you would pass by and stop and look at and think, without quite knowing why, that this was what it looked like when lost things found their way home. Lyra closed her eyes. She pressed her palm flat against the stone floor and felt the mountain beneath her, solid and vast and ancient, and beneath that the heartbeat of the earth itself, steady as a promise, steady as a tide. Steady as the man beside her reading military history to a sleeping child in a cradle that was no longer empty.